Well, thank you all for being here. It's a privilege to introduce the speaker, and I want to thank Corey Leonard, who just spoke to you, for his support in helping bring Rabbi Cohen-Kiener to our campus. And I also want to thank the Executive Board of Utah Interfaith Power and Light, who are the sponsors of her visit to the state of Utah. Some of the board members are here with me, and I'm privileged to be on that board with them, and it's been a great experience. Let me tell you just briefly what Utah Interfaith Power and Light is. There's a national organization known as Interfaith Power and Light, and it is devoted to bringing together in an interfaith way different religious communities to fight climate change. And Utah Interfaith Power and Light, by the way, has a website, and you can Google that and find it and find lots of valuable information about what's going on nationally, internationally, as well as locally. But I was invited to be part of that board recently and have had just an incredible experience meeting people of faith here in the state of Utah, a variety of different religious persuasions, and seeing and being inspired by the things that they're doing, and feeling grateful for the chance as a member of the LDS Church to make a contribution and to help to broaden our collective efforts in trying to do more to protect our environment. So, and that's the context in which Rabbi Cohen-Kiener has come to Utah, and she is excited, I think, to talk with you and interact with you in this hour. Andrea Cohen-Kiener is the director of the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network, which is a faith-based initiative in environmental theology and practice, and that's one of the things that I think is very appealing about having her here, is that she's a real practitioner and someone who's on the ground level with religious communities dealing with the issues that concern us. And she is the spiritual leader of Congregation Pnai Or of Central Connecticut, and has degrees in Hebrew literature, secondary education, and pastoral counseling. She was ordained as a rabbi in July of 2000 by the Alliance for Jewish Renewal. She lectures frequently on issues in congregational worship, Jewish feminism, ecology, communication, and spirituality. She is a well-respected teen and family educator and a frequent guest at congregations and retreat centers in New England and throughout the United States. And she's also the author and editor of a number of books, most recently Claiming Earth as Common Ground, The Environmental Crisis Through the Lens of Religion, which is, of course, the topic of her discussion today. So without further ado, I turn the time over to Rabbi Andrea Cohen-Kiener. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here. I don't know if you share my excitement, but I just am so excited to be at the heart of this institution and have a chance to share with you from some of the cutting-edge questions that I have about faith and environmentalism. I'm delighted to have been informed by Dr. Hanley of a beginning of an education for me about LDS philosophy, about this issue. I'm very excited for this opportunity for learning and exchange. So that's really my theme, is that I hope that it will be an exchange. And I'd like to share with you what I think religions are doing in general. I think what religions are doing in general is trying to help us be a being that doesn't really have one nature. I don't think there's human nature. I think there's human natures. It feels to me like it says in the First Testament in Genesis, that in a way it's kind of literally true, that we're made out of earth and God's breath. Because we are made out of earth, we're made out of minerals and water in the same proportion roughly as they appear on the planet. And then there's something else. There's consciousness, there's breath, there's life, there's self-awareness. And we are in a relationship with that parent, the parent of the God Spirit in us, as well as in a relationship with earth. And I certainly feel these two appetites in myself. Like, part of me wants the last piece of pizza, and part of me wants to make sure that you get the last piece of pizza. So we have these decisions to make and these balances to make. And I do really think, and you can agree or disagree, that it's a hard thing to do, that we're balancing our different appetites and different needs. And we do have physical appetites and physical needs, and I believe we have spiritual appetites and spiritual needs. Now, the thing is, you can suppress your spiritual appetites for a little bit longer than you could go without food and water. So the general sort of shared experience, like what we all know, is that we have bodies and we need to eat. And, it's just a little bit easier to see the propensity of the body, because the spirit and how we experience the spirit, it's different for each of us. It changes during the day. We have different language for it. It's invisible. Do you know? But if you look at the great monotheisms of the West, which are the traditions I know the most about relatively, you can really see that we're trying to say what is more important, what has value here. And the interesting thing, and just a little I've read, and you'll correct me and inform me later, is that it seems to me that Mormon philosophy holds this kind of exquisite balance that we have to hold them both in the scale, that our interaction with the natural world is infused with a sense of this is the dwelling place of the divine, or the handicraft of the divine. We could pick out that language a little bit more carefully if we like, but that we are moral agents, as if stewards and caretakers, representatives of the house of God, so to speak, and that we have to keep both of those, our own appetites and needs and our spiritual obligation, in mind there. So again, you'll tell me later if I'm misrepresenting that. Now, I do believe that it's possible to err in both directions. It's possible to err on the side of humanism and materialism, and I think our culture in general, and maybe this is changing a little bit, our American culture, our Western zeitgeist is way materialistic, like way, way, way materialistic, much to our disadvantage. But I do think that there's a way to sort of grasp theology and religion where we're really in avoidance of the body, we're in fear of the body, we're in denial of the needs of the body, and I don't think that's really possible. I don't think it's that healthy. I think it sets us up for some shadow as we kind of repress our own natural appetites and just go, oh, look at those guys over there all doing all the stuff I wish I could do, but I'm too holy to do that. Do you know what I think? I think if you go too much on the spirit side, we end up sort of projecting some of our own real human needs on others, and it's not really that balance point that leads to sort of knowing the truth about ourselves and leads to compassion and understanding our uniqueness but our commonality with others. That's kind of how I look at it. So I wrote this book, and I asked a woman to write the introduction for it. Sally Bingham wrote the introduction. So I want to tell you one thing about Sally Bingham. Sally Bingham started a movement about 15 years ago called the Episcopal Power and Light. Did you hear that? Did you hear that Episcopal thing in there? And there she was about 2 years into it, and I said, that sounds cool. I wish Judaism had the Jewish power and light, And when I got the memo from Sally, we're not calling it that anymore. It's not the Episcopal Power and Light because the Episcopals can't do it alone. And so she changed her orientation and her organization, her language and her structure into the interfaith power and light. So that's a little bit instructive. But she called me and she said, so what is this book about? What are you trying to do with the book? And you know what I said to her? No, you don't know what I said to her. I said, I really want people to have a felt connection with the universe. That's what I want. So I asked a bunch of, 5th and 6th graders, 7th graders today. I'm going to ask you the same thing. We'll do it by a show of hands. Have you had an experience that I would call a spiritual experience? For me, it was feeling very, very safe, and at the same time, very, very large. Like I was looking at the stars, actually, literally. I was looking at the stars lying on the earth. I felt very, very large, and I felt very, very small at the same time. Show of hands if you've had a spiritual experience. You see? And so what does that really say? It's like it is something that we don't tell each other. It's something that we don't teach our children. We are cosmic. We are enormous. We are the edge of creation unvolving right now. We are Earth's capacity to know of herself. We are neurons in the mind, in the knowingness. of earth. It's so profound. And we walk around thinking that we're people who need to buy a better life insurance policy and people that need to change toothpaste so we'll have more boyfriends and girlfriends. It's like so crazy. The materialistic culture puts us in such a limited place of who we are. We're consumers. We're supposed to consume. I mean, so I just want to say really, really, really loud and clear that consumerism is not patriotism. I want to really unlink that. Go read Ben Franklin and what our founding father Ben Franklin had to say about waste. It is not pious, it is not patriotic to consume more than we need and to create waste. There's nothing beneficial about that, and I want to reclaim my patriotic virtue as a person who respects and uses resources wisely. So this heritage that we have as human beings, this sort of breaks my heart. There's a lot of things in environmental decay that really break my heart. There's a real lot of things. Have you heard about fish in the Chesapeake Bay? That baby is cute, by the way. I just have to... Fish in the Chesapeake Bay, male and female fish, are now producing eggs. That's disturbing. Raise your hand if your life is affected by cancer, asthma, autoimmune diseases, food allergies. I'm allergic to wheat. Wheat is the food that sustained our ancestors since the beginning of time, and I can't eat that wheat because somebody got a hold of it and changed it a little bit. That's not good. But the thing that really hurts my heart and that I grieve about the most is when indigenous people go extinct, or when they're uprooted from their indigenous environment, because what happens when that is lost is that how many thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years of human intelligence about how to live in a certain environment, what's safe to eat, how the seasons are working, how we fit into the cycle of it all. I mean, there's a brilliance in that in our arrogance of the last 150 years we dare to call primitive. That's a terrible loss to us. It's a really terrible loss of millennia of human wisdom, and it breaks my heart when that happens, because we're going to need that wisdom. We are going to need that wisdom again. So that's concerning to me. Those are people with a felt connection, a real connection to their place, and it's helpful for us. So if it is really true that we are all together on this big orb of Earth and dancing through the cosmos with the other spheres, so this puts me, a Jew, and you all, most of you here being Mormons, it puts us in a kind of a strange kettle of fish. We're in this kettle in here with our Catholic friends. We're in it with our evangelical Christian friends. We're in it with all of our friends who feel like they have the way or a way. And that is to say, oh my gosh, if it really is true, let's say I'm going to go back to being a Jew. I'll go small again. I'm going to go back to being a Jew. And I've been raised up to know that I have an excellent path and a wise tradition, probably the best tradition, at least for myself. Maybe others will learn from me in the future time. We do think of Judaism as that way, that we're kind of the God experts, and the other nations will come and study theology from us in the end of time. We have our own triumphalism, our own view about our importance in that, in the ultimate scheme, even though we're small people. So let's say I have this insight, and I've grown up, I've been enculturated with this insight, and then I find out that, believe it or not, when I go into churches and mosques, I feel the Spirit, they know God, they have their own language and their own path for balancing this project of being, let's say, the breath of God stuck in a rock, stuck in material matter, and their way is a way, and their God is my God. Okay, so here I come to a speed bump. Here I come to a speed bump, because if I want to stay in my place, that I have the way, so then I'm going to sort of not really want to open to the implications of the cosmic God, of the God that is enlivening me through this enterprise of existence, right? Because that is shared. Or maybe my sense of exclusivism is transformed, and I have a sense that I'm very alive in my own tradition, and these others are very alive in their tradition, and isn't it a loving God we serve? But you see where I have to go through this speed bump of my own uniqueness. Maybe there's a growing in that. maybe there's a greater truth in that. But I think at other levels of consciousness, that would be frightening, wouldn't it? That would be a speed bump that we wouldn't all go over. So I kind of tease people about that when I say to them, how great is your God? Because everyone wants to go to the place where their God is the cosmic God, yeah? But not everyone wants to go to the place that it's everyone else's cosmic God also. So I invite you to just sort of examine that psychologically, spiritually, theologically. Can you make room in your theology for others to serve and enjoy in their own way? And it's a challenge I have for myself as well as members of various groups that I speak to. So this brings us to the question, let's say we're aware that our impact on this planet is not sustainable. That's really serious. When I say unsustainable, I know that's just like one little word, but really what you should be thinking on this is drink the Kool-Aid. This unsustainable means it can't keep going like this. So that means radical simplification on a wide scale, or it means much less of us. And I'm not saying population control. I'm saying tsunami. I'm saying storms. I'm saying starvation, water shortages. I think there are natural limits to growth, and right now we're starting to come across them in episodes and in isolated locations around the planet. There are already water wars. There are already other kinds of resource wars. There is already salinization of well water in important parts of the world that grow a lot of grain and feed a lot of people. There's already a redistribution of precipitation patterns that's flooding some areas and putting drought in other areas that were formerly or just holding on to their standing as agricultural centers. This is going to happen more. This is going to happen more. There's kind of a physics to it. But I think you would agree with me, if I'm understanding Mormon philosophy correctly, that there's kind of a feedback system here, that God isn't up there, in my language, God isn't up there saying, oh, all those people aren't keeping this commandment in Torah and that commandment of Torah. I'm going to send a drought. I don't think God is up there with thunderbolts, but I think our interaction with the natural world is creating these patterns, which are global patterns. And I don't think it's arrogant of me to say that. I don't think it's arrogant of me to say our human action all collectively can affect the environment. There's a lot of us, and we make a lot of smoke and ash in any given day. And where is that going? That's going in the same holding system that's been holding us so long. So I think that is underway, and we are required, and we'll figure out in our own way how it is that we're required to respond to that. But I have a couple questions for us. Do we want to work together? And do we need to work together? I was telling my colleagues on the way over here that I have allies in the Catholic Church. They're very sweet. And they'll call me every once in a while when they're doing a climate change event just to tell me it's happening so I don't find out by surprise. I am not invited. I'm not invited to speak. I'm not invited to table. I have, with my Catholic colleagues in Connecticut, we do parallel play. Do you know what I mean? And I call them an ethnic church, which is kind of funny. And I want to talk to you about the phenomena of ethnic churches because I do a lot of coalition building in Connecticut. And what I call Judaism an ethnic church. You might be an ethnic church. I first noted the phenomena when I started reaching out to like Baptists and then the Korean Baptists, right? Or to any sort of immigrant population. And then I realized when I reached out to my own Jewish community and I was going and doing my spiel about environment, and they would say to me, that's nice, dear. That's nice, dear. It's good for the Gentiles. Have you heard that phrase? It's good for, go and heal the world with them. You know what I mean? Because that's changing, by the way. It is changing a little bit in the Jewish community, but there was this general sense in an ethnic church, what I call an ethnic church, there's a general sense that there's another layer of identity that's going on, that's happening, that people justifiably, by the way, people believe this is something that is uniquely our responsibility to take care of. So if you're running a Spanish church, you might agree with me completely that there should be less environmental toxins. But right now, today, you have to get a Spanish-speaking interpreter down to the courthouse. There's another pressing pastoral need that you have. And so there I'm also going to get a pat on the head and say, very nice work that you're doing. Go do it with others. Do you know what I mean? And less sort of coalition building. So an ethnic church has a sort of a natural boundary about it. It's already doing what it's doing, so there may be less opportunity for them to be in colleagueship with me. So then I feel, then the ball's back in my court. And so when I reach out to a Jewish congregation or to a Muslim congregation of immigrants or to a black church, a traditional black church in downtown Hartford, it is my job as an environmentalist to say, what is my common cause with this person? Why should they join with me to do this? And this has set me off because I'm open about this. It's the right question to ask. So that has set me off on this whole track of like green jobs, dignified jobs, green dignified careers, and different land use patterns in urban areas, cleaner, safer, healthy environments in urban centers, et cetera, et cetera. So I think some of these ideas about working together will bring us to new questions and to new partnerships, if that's what we feel called to do, if that's our responsibility in this. Do we want to work together? Do we need to work together? Maybe it's fine to have parallel play. I want to tell you a story, though, which is like this. You know the phrase, the chosen people? Do you know about that? So now, Jews are really tiny, teeny, do you ever use that phrase? Is that in the Mormon vernacular, the parlance? Okay, so me as a Jew, I'm like such a big liberal. My brains fell out. I'm so open-minded, my brains fell out. That's one way you might say it. But I don't like that so much. And there's a number of places in my own prayer book where I'll change the language when that comes up. I'm not alone in that. There are other denominations in Judaism that have said, who drew us closer to your work, instead of who chose us from among all the nations. Usually I say, who chose us with all the other nations. I'm willing to be unique. But this language about being so special, I don't think that's been especially healthy for our psychology. So anyways, I was off on a retreat with a bunch of Jewish kids, and we did a really cool thing on them. We made them go on a vision quest. We told them their bar mitzvah when they come of age, that they're going to be 13, and that there's a Torah reading for their week that they were born. And we gave them a little phrase from their Torah. And we said to them, go out and find the place in this field, in this area, that has been here since the beginning of creation, waiting for you to go to it and understand what it is to become an adult on this week, on this time, in this place, on this day. It was like so powerful. We made them go overnight in their little place and contemplate their Torah work. It was very, very powerful. Wind back, wind back, wind back. There was a Christian woman who said, can I go with you? I would love to be with God's chosen people. And actually I had a funny reaction to that. I was going, yeah, but at the same time I was going like, I was a little shadowy about it because she's chosen too. Do you know what I mean? She's special too. I didn't want to be special in a way that set me above or apart or something like that. But the thing is, during the week, and she wasn't just saying that to get into my living room and convert me to Christianity, which I would have resented, frankly, but it was exciting for her to be with the people of the Torah, and she wanted to contribute. She was very sweet. And so what happened to me was that I saw my Judaism kind of reflected back to me in a way that made me feel special, that was healthy, and that was okay to feel special. It was kind of sweet. And then I had an environmentalist one time say to me, now, I think we keep Sabbath like you keep Sabbath. No working, no driving, we don't cook, we don't like fires, we cook everything in advance, we have meals and sing and walk. And a traditional Jewish Sabbath is celebrated within a mile of your house. You go to services and have all your friends, and they all live near you. And I was telling an environmentalist about Sabbath, and she said to me, wait a minute, Christian woman, she said, wait a minute. Are you telling me in every major city in North America there are people who choose to live near each other so they can share in community, so they can walk to each other's house, so they can celebrate together, eat together, feed each other, worship together? Are you telling me that there's a conscious geographical community in every major city in North America? She said, if I tell my environmental friends, they won't believe it. It's like a green utopia vision. You understand what I'm saying? But Jews don't see it as that. We don't see Shabbat as totally green, as total eco-Sabbath. I got to get in there and say, you guys, you're doing something really ecological here. And ask my Jewish friends to sort of raise it up in their own consciousness as good medicine for the time that we're in. It puts us in a totally different relationship to Sabbath, because we're used to doing our Sabbath like this. Like, we're like this, right? And so I'm asking them to sort of, raise it up and invite others and make it a community that's really a community, not just their Jewish friends, but also their non-Jewish neighbors and whatnot. So having said that little introduction, I want to reflect back to you what I heard in the material that George sent me that was, by the way, very, very beautiful. And I want to say something about the material that I read. I don't need to give you compliments, but I will say, as a nice Jewish girl growing up, I was not encouraged to read Second Testament. Do you know what I mean by Second Testament? I'll just have to do a reality check here. Everyone got that? Do you know why I don't call it Old and New? Yes? No? Okay, great. Okay, so Second Testament, Christian scriptures, as the scholars usually say. I was not really encouraged to read it. Lo and behold, I start reading my college years and above, and I thought, whoa, I see what they mean about authority. In other words, I was reading his teachings, and I felt them. And so I know that he had authority and power. Whatever I think about his divinity and the theology and all that, I'm not going to comment on that, but I felt his teachings. And that's happened to me with other Gnostic expressions and other expressions. And when I was reading the materials that you sent me, I felt the authority and the power of, was it D&C and some of the other pieces, the quotes from Joseph Smith, and also that he was onto something. He had something that was felt. And in my tradition, as a Jewish mystic, not as a Jew, but as a Jewish mystic, I understand, I have a way of understanding that people can receive revelation in their lives, in their days, going on down till today. And I understand that's something that's shared between me as a Jewish mystic and you as people of the Mormon faith. So I don't know enough to really make the comparison, but in my tradition, that does make sense. So I think you guys might be like a form of Christian mysticism that's trying to be practiced by all. Most mysticisms are practiced by a few. And the more sort of doctrinal teaching is what's shared. But you might be having sort of a modern mysticism that's trying to hold all in the collective. So that's pretty challenging what you're doing, if I understand it correctly. So I want to reflect back to you what I've read in the past. Sabbath. I just told you about Sabbath. I know it's kept in this community, and I do believe it's good medicine. The pause is good medicine. I have a rabbi friend, Arthur Waskow. He says we should stop once in a while and not be human doings, but be human beings. Sabbath is a time to be a human being, because the rest of the week we're a human doing, which I think he calls attention to something lovely here. I read about self-reliance. I read about a local, more sustainable, more seasonal food culture, less meat in the diet, more local and seasonal foods, more of what we need being grown and raised and created and shared among us in a relocalization. Is that reflect a correct understanding of the thought and practice of Mormonism? Can I just see a nod if I'm kind of getting that right? And I want to say to you again that is very, very good medicine. And you might think about doing that more consciously as a model, sharing the model with others, and or sharing the technology of local self-reliance with others. I think it's really has a lot of wisdom in it. Local community, local economies, a right relationship with wealth. I think what I've read about wealth, tithing, serving, giving back, brilliant. Very good medicine for sort of greed and consume. That whole consciousness, I think you have something healthy to offer there. I think most churches do have something healthy to offer there, but sometimes we do it with a little bit of trepidation because we don't want to insult the rich people, so we don't want to say wealth is bad. But wealth isn't bad. It's the use of our resources. It's the impact of the gain of our resources. These are the things which can become good and bad. But having a lot of resources means having a lot of opportunities. So if we're just with that, if we're tithing, if we're humble, if we're receiving and giving back in the spirit and in alignment with universal laws and religious principles, then good. Mabruk, blessing. So right relationship with wealth, right relationship with appetites. I know we keep kosher. There's certain things we can't buy. There's certain clothes we can't wear. There's certain styles that I can't really wear as an observant Jew. And I know that this is a serious practice. You can tell our faith by how we look. We live it and we carry it with us in our garb and whatnot. So there's like a good balancing there between needs of spirit and needs of flesh, and that's a very good modeling that we can speak about with pride and not with like restriction. Oh, I can't eat that. No, I'd love to eat that. I remember lobster fondly. I remember bacon very fondly. Yeah, I choose not to right now. I'm satisfied in other ways. You know what I mean? So, and then this sort of ongoing reevaluation, this ongoing balance, what is needed in the human order, what is needed in the natural order, this capacity to keep asking ourselves afresh, what is needed in this situation. That's mysticism. Showing up in the moment without so much creed, without doctrine, without, well, here's how he's always done it, but with a really fresh question about what is required in this moment. I think that's very courageous. And that really is where the cutting edge of any kind of growth is going to come from that. Not just from schlepping the baggage from the past and from the tradition. We bring that. But we're also guided by the present moment and by the call of the present moment. And my understanding of Mormonism is that there are mechanisms understood within the church, within our psychology, to take that sort of ability to respond, that responsiveness. So that human wisdom gets to keep evolving through us as we contemplate these issues. There's other things I'd like to share, I'd like to respond to, but I do want to leave lots of good time for our interaction, for our questions and answers, and we have to be conscious of a microphone becoming available because we're taping this. So any burning questions, comments, or thoughts, or challenges? I'm not afraid of sixth graders. I'm not afraid of you guys. Yes, sir.
My question is, and I think that you have a lot of interesting things to say about this, is why is the environment a religious issue? Because a lot of the things you're talking about are good practices, and that different traditions have that might lead to good ecological awareness, but they don't always. In fact, they haven't historically led to that, even though perhaps they should have. So the question is, what is the role of religion in raising environmental consciousness? And you kind of alluded this at the beginning, but I'd like to hear more.
What's your name?
Chip Oscarson.
Chip, right here, I skipped over that, and it says, what does our faith say about this? And that, in my notes, I wrote no green patch. And what I mean to say about that is my sense of environment and how it touches up to Judaism. This is not the green patch. This is not the Jewish person joins Sierra Club. For me, I have commandments. I have commandments to not waste. I have commandments about biodiversity. I have commandments about rest on Sabbath. I have commandments about saying prayers before I eat. The commandment to don't waste, it says in my tradition, that the teaching is that the commandment to not waste is given to us to sensitize our souls. So that I could no sooner rip up this piece of paper as I could punch you. They would both be felt as equally violent and destructive. So I think what changed for me when I became an environmental Jew, where I started to see these mitzvot, these commandments, as a coherent, like, instruction manual for life on earth, if you will, was when I got that whole cosmological thing, where I got that sense of the big God that's working with us and with nature to give us a place to learn and grow, and to show us that all of our actions have consequences, so that we can learn about making choices. This too is shared with Judaism and Mormonism. This whole sense of consciousness and choice and consequences is very, very central. So I can speak about that for myself, for my tradition, and each will have to answer for our own. But I've heard some of my Christian friends say stuff like, I'll tell you something beautiful. A sister friend of mine said, and I wouldn't say this as a Jew, but she's a nun, so she can say it. So here she was in her backyard, and she picks up this whole little pile of compost like this, and this beautiful black soil is oozing through her hands, and she goes, look, life after death. Or the sense, and my Episcopal friends speak this way, they say that our caring extends in the name of our Father and so on, extends to the least among us, and that this includes microbes. This certainly includes native Inuit and the Tuvalu Islanders. I mean, a lot of people are really motivated about this because of the human impact and the human consequences and the justice issue and the impact on human population. So I think all of those things come into play, actually. And then really at the end of the day, I mean, there's a commandment in Judaism that you're allowed to break almost every single other commandment. There's only 3 exceptions that you can't commit incest, you can't kill, and you can't defame the name of God. But every other commandment you can break. You can break Sabbath, you can break eating pork and everything else, and that is for the preservation of a life. And when we're talking about the preservation of whole human populations, that there's clearly, for me, a scientific moral issue of our time, that mitzvah, that commandment to preserve life is called into play at this time. And then others may want to respond in other ways, so it's a good question. Thank you.
I'd like to rephrase Chip's question a little bit because at one point you spoke a bit about your outreach work. And I know that there are many of us who are involved in wanting to speak with our own faith community or other faith communities about the moral or ethical imperative of environmentalism. And so I'm curious, how do you think that we can speak to others about this issue as a moral issue when so often people consider it a political issue and then will shut down? And so, if we have felt that kind of conversion, as you were just speaking of yourself, how do we speak with others about this in a way that will allow us to kind of build this coalition instead of shut down the conversation before it starts?
That's really delicious. It's a really, really great question. I want to say one thing that I know doesn't work. Guilt tripping, shaming, feeling better than, excoriating, that usually doesn't feel good. Essentially, sharing from the heart really feels good, sharing that passion. I would think sharing fruits from your garden in a very literal sense, but also in a metaphorical sense, might be a way of sort of really celebrating your ministry together, not hitting people over the head with Jesus or Judaism or ecology or anything like that, but just saying, this is the fruit of my spirit, this is the healing work that's possible in my home, on my block, in my church, in my town, and sharing from that, I think it's very inviting. When I do outreach, one other tool that I use, not to hit people over the head, is, I hope you understand what I mean by that, but I do a thing that I call naming the pain. And I talk about the tenseness in our stomach. I talk about that sense of rush, that sense of like inadequacy that we feel so often of the time. And I think that's because we're trying to meet our spiritual hungers through material food. And so I try to point out that imbalances that I sense that people are already feeling because they are already out of balance. But then I say to them, look, fear isn't that good, is it? I mean, going into a place of fear, I think probably there is some grief to go through. There may be some fear in the waking up stage of what could be lost, okay? So part of this is a pastoral issue of helping people feel their way through it, through the despair, through the grief, through the rage and the sorrow and all this and that. It's a pastoral issue, part of it. But I like to name the pain and then put out there some of the sweet benefits, as I say all the time in my writings, community building and healing and justice and truth. That's what churches are about. That is our business. That is our business. And in our generation, it looks like gardening. Now, gardening, I'm saying to hold the place for other actions that are right actions, including conservation and simplification and this whole internal transformation that I'm talking about. But let us pause for a minute on politics, which is very, very good to talk about. Here's the deal. Our organization, I mean nationally and myself in Connecticut, we're definitely political. We're completely political, but we're not partisan. Do you know what I mean? We're not for one candidate or another. We're for, first of all, having conversations that take in our political opponents and our economic theory opponents. We really need a lot of wisdom to decide things together, okay? And I think that technology of sort of consulting with many and listening deeply to others and the concerns of their heart. Like in my organization, we have a lot of alliances with hunters and fishers. And fishermen, I think you have the same thing out here, because these are people, to quote my evangelical friend, these are people who are very conservative. And he says to them, what is it that you want to conserve exactly? And it is mystery and splendor and open spaces and our capacity to be in these wild places and so on. So I have very great alliance with the people that I probably don't vote the same way as them. I'm sure they think I'm going to hell, some of them, for my perfidious beliefs and whatnot. But, there are points where we can find agreement and dialogue. And I think as people of faith, we might be able to kind of get in there with a little alchemy of listening. We might go in there with a little alchemy of being right, and then we're going to be met with that alchemy of being right and kind of try to outmaneuver each other. That's usually how political conversations do happen. It's a lot about outmaneuvering each other. But I think we can at the same time foster a kind of dialogue and share our mission and our practice in ways that are much more inviting and inclusive. Somebody said to me once, well, are you trying to save everybody? And that would mean, are we trying to get massive policy changes about energy resources and consumption levels and carbon tax? Are we trying to force all that legislation to happen? Would I like it to happen? Definitely yes. Can I force it? No. I can spend a lot of energy in that kind of embroiled conversation, but I can't force it. So the question, am I trying to save everybody? Yes, but in the meantime, I'm encouraging us to garden more, because regardless of the policy, these are the actions, the caring, community-building actions. This is what we're going to need to go forward. So, and that's political too, isn't it? Making your own strawberry jam, that's a political action. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Then I'm a very political person.
There you go. There you go. But I don't mean to avoid the policy issue. There really are. We would be very much helped by cleaner energy and by smaller consumptions, higher energy vehicles, more public transit. All these things are hard to talk about in a recession, but we would really be helped by those things. But I try to name the positive things, the community vision that I think can come out of it. Believe it or not, people feel good when we think about things like that. Are you feeling that? You guys aren't laughing enough, so it could be me. I don't know. It could be me, but it could be you. I don't know. Other questions, comments about? Thank you.
Yeah, my question's about what you just said there at the very end about economic policies, and mine was namely about cap and trade. And what's your feelings on that? Do you think it could possibly be a hurt to the economy, or do you think it could economically be beneficial?
Okay, I'm speaking as Andrea Cohen-Kiener, individual. Cap and trade sounds very complicated to me. It sounds like it's going to be necessary to create a whole sort of economic structure to tally all that and to do the trading. That sounds like a lot of the dollars generated, the dollar benefit is going to be sucked right up into that infrastructure. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of ways around it, this and that. Some people in our kind of inner circle of the Interfaith Power and Light that really are really tabulating the political stuff very, very well and effectively and helpfully. They said to us that we should be for cap and trade because that's probably what we could get through in terms of it might be palatable enough. But to me, there's a lot of obstacles to it. I think it would be mixed in terms of the benefit. Personally, I'd like to see a straight-up carbon tax. I would like to see something built into the cost that allows us to invest in ways that really ameliorate, whether it's adaptation or whether it's development of new technologies. I think, we're an inventive people. We're an inventive nation. And I think in the long term, our economy will really, however we get there in terms of economic policy, however we get there, I think we really will be helped by having a local solar industry and a local wind industry and local recycling of bio-waste and biofuels. I think there's a lot of technologies that could be driven with or without cap and trade that would both reduce pollution, reduce waste, and distribute forms of energy. The main obstacle that we have to get over in terms of energy use, and this is a big obstacle in a lot of the things that we might want to think about and talk about together, is that It doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to be one big thing. It doesn't need to be 20 more nuclear stations. That really the power of all of us caulking our windows really makes an impact. The power of one cow farmer setting up a way to recompost their manure so it generates heat, that's really small, isn't it? But the need of it and the technology of it can be replicated, so that small thing really can be a big thing when it goes into other areas. But we think very corporately in North America. We think like we need to change everything. I think that we can be trained to see a lot of incremental benefits and smaller changes. So in terms of policy, I'm not really answering your question, but as I said, I would like to see a carbon tax. I don't know if that will come about, but I'd like to see it invested in some of these other long-term benefits, even if they're localized and seem fairly small and only help the problem a little bit. I think that whole thing of empowering ourselves, that is really the most powerful idea I want to share with you today, that our own actions, our own speaking of the truth from the heart and so on can really transform. Maybe even just us. Maybe it can just transform us. Yes, sir.
Last question,
I think. We're just so detached from all of our effects on the environment. Like, I don't know where my water comes from, where my food comes from, where my garbage goes. And so I guess most of the environmentally friendly things I try to do are just kind of theoretical in my mind. Yeah. Do you think that because we are so far removed from the effects we have on the environment that their policy changes are necessary? Or do you see like a shift in community style or another solution?
Well, I wish this wasn't the case, but I think that policy stuff is necessary and will be really, really helpful. But I think that that it's really has gotten bogged down for about 3 decades now, 2 decades at least. So, and that really isn't transformative. Okay, so the difference between change and transformation is like this. Like, the mafia is in the trash hauling business. So what happens is we have laws about stuff that you can't dump into the rivers. And so what happens is that criminals get involved with it and they dump it into the rivers anyway. So we had a change in the law, but we didn't have a transformative effect. Do you know what I mean? So policy changes are necessary. Transformation we can affect a lot more, and there's a lot of benefits in it, like we'll feel healthier, we'll be more connected to each other, more appreciative, and so on. But I have a feeling, and this is the part that I really am almost hesitant to say, but I have a feeling that we're not going to get motivated to do the policy shifts until we do really see the connections. But I think that's becoming clearer. I think no one is framing Iraq as a resource war about oil. It's not political to say that. It disrespects our men and women in uniform. But I think it's just obviously true, and we might as well tell the truth about that. I do think a lot of our asthmas, cancers and all, I think they're environmental epidemics, and we might as well just tell the truth about that. We have to start connecting the dots that we're already living with the consequences, and then when that becomes clear to people, I think that we will see the political will develop. And in the meantime, Farmer Joe will have started his manure thing, and we'll have heard about it on NPR or in the local paper, and so more will replicate it, et cetera, et cetera. It might grow kind of virally like that, and we'll be ready for the change when the political will meets ours. It has to do with connecting the dots, mostly. Well, this was fun for me. I hope it was instructive and useful for you. Thank you.